Welcome to the season finale of our deep dive series.
It is great to be here for this one.
Yeah, and for you, our ever-curious listener, we have, we've saved the absolute most critical, high-stakes investigation for
I
last.
really have.
Today, we are pulling back the curtain on a structural failure so massive and so completely hidden in plain sight that it is actually threatening to stall the entire global economy.
Right, and ground zero for this impending crisis is the Asia-Pacific region.
Exactly. We are taking a very raw, highly cynical look at an industry that is projecting infinite growth while its actual foundation completely crumbles.
It's a phenomenal and, frankly, an alarming situation to unpack. We're looking at a system that has just been pushed to the absolute breaking point.
Yeah.
And if we want to frame this properly right from the start, I think the best way to look at it is this. The global aviation industry is currently drunk on aircraft orders, but it is deeply hungover on human reality.
Trunk on aircraft, hungover on human reality. I love that. That perfectly captures the metaphor we're using today, the invisible ceiling.
The invisible ceiling, right?
Because if you look at the mainstream headlines, the aviation sector in APAC looks like an unstoppable juggernaut.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we see record profits, massive fleet expansions, this exploding middle class eager to travel. But the raw data from our stack of sources tells a terrifyingly different story.
It really does.
We have industry forecasts from Boeing, Comac, and IATA. We're digging into corporate reports from massive maintenance players like SIAEC, TAI Airways, and GMF Aero Asia. Plus, we've got workforce blueprints from the Singapore government.
And when you synthesize all those blueprints and those highly critical analytical texts, the underbelly of this industry is just totally exposed.
Right.
We aren't just dealing with a temporary labor shortage here.
Mm-hmm.
We are fundamentally running out of the physical infrastructure that keeps the sky safe.
Yeah, the reality is incredibly simple,
Yeah.
yet completely ignored by the market. If the hands do not follow the orders, the planes do not fly. So let's start with that first part of your framing, the idea that the industry is drunk on aircraft. Because looking at the data, the order books right now look like a shopping spree with zero credit limit.
That's a great way to put it.
Just how massive is this projected growth in the Asia-Pacific region?
The numbers are staggering. I mean, to put in perspective, let's look at the projections from Comac. That's the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China.
Right.
Their market forecast anticipates that the Asia-Pacific region alone will take delivery of roughly 18,650 new aircraft over the next 2 decades.
18,000.
Over 18,500.
Yeah.
To visualize that, we're talking about more than 42% of the entire global total of new planes heading to just one region.
So almost half of all the new airplanes built on Earth are going to APAC.
Exactly.
And we see this reflected in the individual corporate reports too, right? Like with THAI Airways?
We do. THI Airways is a perfect example of this aggressive capital expansion. They are targeting a fleet of 93 aircraft by 2026. Yeah, bringing in this massive influx of A321neos, Boeing 787s, Airbus A350s, across the board from legacy carriers to budget airlines. Executives are ordering Boeing 737 MXs and A320neos like they're buying toys off a shelf.
It's just wild. The entire economic model is built on this assumption of endless, frictionless growth, fueled by liberalizing visa policies and expanding networks.
But pouring endless capital into new planes assumes those planes can actually be delivered on time.
Right. And looking at the data from our sources on the manufacturing side, that infinite growth facade starts to crack immediately.
It really does.
What is the actual reality of the supply chain right now?
It is a severe hangover. We have data from IATA, the International Air Transport Association, along with logistics intelligence from Demerco, and they paint a very grim picture.
How grim.
The major manufacturers are severely struggling with their own supply chains. Lead times for new aircraft have stretched to a record 5.3 to 8 years.
8 years.
Yes. So an airline executive can announce a massive fleet expansion today to boost their stock price, but they might not actually see that physical airplane sitting on their tarmac until the next decade.
Which creates a massive knock-on effect. If an airline cannot get the shiny new planes they ordered to handle their passenger demand, they're forced to sweat their older legacy aircraft.
Legacy.
They just have to keep those aging planes in the sky way longer than originally intended.
And aging planes require significantly more heavy maintenance. They require more frequent and invasive inspections, intensive structural corrosion management, and a constant stream of replacement parts.
But those parts are caught in the exact same supply chain nightmare.
They are. IATA highlights that these aviation supply chain challenges are projected to cost the airline industry more than $11 billion in 2025 alone,
11 billion.
just in 1 year. Shortages of critical components from avionics down to engine fan blades are extending turnaround times in the hangars. A plane that should be in the shop for 3 weeks is suddenly stuck there for 3 months waiting on a single part.
And this brings us squarely to the core of the invisible ceiling. Because an airplane, no matter how technologically advanced it is,
Right.
no matter if it costs $150 million, it's technically just a massive, expensive liability sitting on the tarmac.
Precisely.
It cannot legally generate a single dollar of revenue until a certified human being signs off on its airworthiness.
That is the crux of this entire investigation. The invisible ceiling is the exact point where raw capital can no longer buy time or skill.
You can't just throw money at it.
No. An airline can borrow billions of dollars.
Yeah.
They can print money to buy a fleet of A350s, but they cannot print a technician with a decade of hands-on experience.
Yeah.
That expertise has to be cultivated, and the industry has spent the last 2 decades doing the exact opposite.
Let's dive into that. The sources refer to this as the devaluation of the craft. And I want to ask you, thinking about you listening to this right now, to picture this from a human perspective. Think about the choices facing the next generation.
It's a stark choice.
It is. Imagine a kid growing up in Singapore looking at their career options. Why would they choose to spend their life fixing a jet engine in a sweltering, noisy hangar, working grueling overnight shifts,
Right.
when they could just sit in an air-conditioned office in a tech hub near Changi and code an app? Grease and wrenches simply cannot compete with Silicon Valley in code.
It's a completely rational choice by that young worker. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to recognize that this talent gap is not some unavoidable accident.
No.
It is the direct result of a deliberate political and economic choice made by the aviation industry over the past several decades.
A choice to prioritize what, exactly?
Efficiency and ultra-low legends. For years, the aviation sector systematically squeezed wages across its maintenance workforce to keep ticket prices low and airline profits high.
Ah.
They optimized every single process, turning the hangar into an environment of incredibly high pressure and a 247 grind, but with stagnant pay structures.
While tech was booming right next door.
Exactly. The tech world was offering stock options, remote work, comfortable environments, a clear path to wealth. So what we are seeing now isn't a mysterious labor shortage, it's a violent market correction.
The industry fundamentally devalued the blue-collar craft of the mechanic, and now that identical craft is becoming the most expensive, restrictive bottleneck in the global economy.
And the math outlining this correction is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, when you look at the Boeing pilot and technician outlook, along with the raw analytical texts we're reviewing, what is the actual deficit we're looking at?
The estimates show that the Asia-Pacific region needs to recruit and train over 250,000 new aircraft technicians by the year 2042.
250,000 people?
Just for APAC. If you look at it globally, that number swells to 690,000. It's a demographic cliff.
Because the current workforce is aging out.
Fast. In mature, established aviation hubs like Singapore, the hangars are staffed by a highly skilled but rapidly aging workforce. And those veteran mechanics are retiring far faster than Generation Z can be recruited, let alone trained, to replace them.
And training is the massive caveat here. You cannot software patch a human mechanic.
No, you can't.
You can't just run them through a 6-week coding boot camp and hand them the keys to a Boeing 777.
Not at all. It takes 3 to 5 years of rigorous study, apprenticeship, and regulatory exams to fully certify a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer.
What they call a lame in the industry.
Right, a lame. Because of this massive lag between the retiring veterans walking out the door and the incoming trainees getting their licenses, the entire system is backing up. Maintenance slots at these heavy repair hangars are now being booked 18 to 24 months in advance.
Think about the operational nightmare that creates for an airline's scheduling department.
It's a disaster.
You have a fleet of planes that legally require a heavy structural teardown to keep flying, but the garage is fully booked for the next 2 years. What happens when the demand for those skills completely outstrips the supply in a region as hyper-competitive as APAC?
You get a corporate war. You get a brutal, unforgiving poaching economy that is essentially cannibalizing the entire region. The sources describe it as a zero-sum game.
Right.
And it is actively reshaping the geopolitical landscape of aviation maintenance. We are seeing the rise of what analysts call the Vietnam-Singapore axis.
Let's get into that. What does that axis actually look like in practice for these maintenance facilities?
Well, you have to look at the MRO sector, which stands for Maintenance, Repair, and Overhaul. You have emerging hubs, countries like Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, and Indonesia, where companies like GMF AeroAsia operate.
Okay.
These developing nations are investing heavy resources to train local mechanics at a lower cost to service their own growing domestic fleets. But the moment those local mechanics get their critical certifications and a few years of experience,
They vanish.
they vanish.
They get bought out by the wealthier neighbors.
Precisely. Massive financial hubs with deep pockets, like Singapore, or the major Middle Eastern carriers operating out of Qatar and the UAE, swoop in. They can easily offer salaries that are 2 or 3 times higher than what a local hangar in Jakarta or Ho Chi Minh City can afford to pay.
Wow.
The talent war has already driven wages up 15 to 20% for skilled engineers in places like Singapore and Malaysia, just to keep them from jumping ship to the Middle East.
So the wealthy nations solve their immediate shortage, but it creates a massive brain drain for the developing nations.
Huge brain drain.
This has to lead to a hollowing out of the local hangars.
Oh.
You end up with a situation where the home hangars for these budget regional airlines are left with extremely junior, inexperienced staff
Right.
who are desperately trying to learn the ropes while being overseen by just a handful of exhausted veterans who couldn't or wouldn't leave.
This creates what is essentially the political economy of maintenance. The rich hubs are buying their safety and operational reliability by completely draining the talent pool of their neighbors.
That's dark.
It is. It's creating a highly dangerous two-tier sky, where the level of experience turning the wrenches on your plane depends heavily on the GDP of the country where it's being maintained.
And that brings us to the most critical stakes of all here, safety. Because we are redlining the human element here. When aviation safety experts look at accidents and near misses, they often refer to the dirty dozen.
Yes.
What exactly does that framework tell us about this current crisis?
The Dirty Dozen is a well-established list of the 12 most common preconditions for human error in aircraft maintenance. If you look at the top of that list, you see factors like fatigue, immense time pressure, lack of communication, stress, and a lack of resources.
And every single one of those factors is drastically amplified by this talent gap.
Every single one.
Let's ground that in a real-world scenario. How does a lack of resources actually translate into a safety risk on the tarmac?
Well, imagine a junior mechanic working the night shift in a sweltering hangar. They're already fatigued because they've been pulling overtime to cover for 3 senior guys who just got poached by a competitor.
Right.
They are under massive pressure from airline management to get an A350 out of the hangar by 6 a.m. because there's no backup aircraft available.
The pressure cooker.
Exactly. Under those specific Dirty Dozen conditions, that mechanic is statistically primed to overlook a microscopic hairline fracture or miss a critical step in a structural corrosion check.
And the technology on the plane, the advanced sensors, they might be perfect.
They usually are.
But if the human supervising that technology, the person physically turning the wrench and signing the legal airworthiness form, hasn't slept in 16 hours, the margin for error vanishes.
Completely vanishes.
The industry is flirting with disaster just to keep the APAC fleet flying.
That is the invisible risk every passenger is taking. The safety buffer isn't shrinking because the machines are failing. It's shrinking because the humans tasked with maintaining them are completely burnt out.
Now, obviously, the massive MRO conglomerates aren't just sitting on their hands watching this happen. They know they can't hire enough people.
Right.
So we're seeing a massive push for what we might call tech band-aids. I'm looking at the blueprints from the Singapore government regarding their smart MRO landscape.
Yes. Companies like SIA Engineering Company, SIAEC, are pouring millions of dollars into high-tech automation to try and innovate their way out of this human shortage.
And the tech described in these reports sounds like science fiction. SIAEC is expanding into Subang, Malaysia to increase their physical hangar capacity.
Yeah.
But inside those hangars, they're deploying autonomous airframe inspection drones that fly around the aircraft, snapping high-definition photos. They're using heavy robotic arms to maneuver landing gear.
It's incredible to watch.
They're integrating AI and generative AI for visual inspections to automatically flag defects. They're even creating digital twins.
Right, the digital twins.
Virtual replicas of aircraft engines that use predictive algorithms to tell mechanics when a part will fail before it actually breaks. The stated goal of all this tech is to reduce aircraft ground time by 25%.
The level of connectivity is really astounding. You have a Rolls-Royce engine flying at 35,000 feet between Jakarta and Singapore, and it is transmitting real-time health data so that the specific replacement parts can be pre-positioned on the tarmac before the plane even lands.
That's brilliant.
It is a brilliant optimization of logistics.
It sounds incredible, though. Like, if we have drones doing the visual inspections and AI predicting the failures, shouldn't that completely solve the human labor shortage?
It seems like it would, but that brings up an incredibly important question about the limits of automation.
Which is?
The fatal flaw in all of this high-tech optimism is the regulatory bottleneck. Automation is fantastic at handling the physical, repetitive tasks, but an algorithm cannot legally certify that an aircraft is safe to fly.
Because there has to be a human neck on the line.
Exactly. An inspection drone can take 1,000 ultra-high-definition pictures of a fuselage in 30 minutes, flagging potential lightning strike damage. But a highly trained human being still has to sit down, analyze that drone data, take personal liability for the decision, and legally sign off on the airworthiness certificate.
So we aren't actually replacing the worker. We are just combining high-tech sensors with those exact same exhausted human mechanics.
Exactly.
The drone does the scanning, but the tired, stressed veteran we talked about earlier still has to review it all. It doesn't actually remove the need for the human expert.
It might make them slightly faster at gathering the data, but it doesn't create more of them. The human bottleneck remains firmly in place. You can have all the AI in the world, but if the single authorized inspector in the hangar is out sick, that $100 million airplane is not leaving the ground.
That is wild. Let's bring this all together. We have exploding aircraft orders, massive supply chain delays, a demographic cliff of mechanics, and tech band-aids that don't fix the regulatory problem.
It's a perfect storm.
It is. So what is the ultimate so what for the global economy here?
The so what is the impending death of ultra-low-cost travel. We discussed earlier how this talent gap is a massive inflation trigger.
Right.
Because these maintenance slots are so incredibly rare and the mechanics so highly paid due to the poaching wars, we are seeing aggressive surge pricing in the hangars.
Meaning the cost of safety is just skyrocketing?
Yes. A heavy maintenance slot that used to cost an airline $150,000 is now seeing massive markups. Or worse, it's simply unavailable at any price within the region.
So what do the airlines do?
This is forcing airlines into absurd logistical nightmares. They're actively flying empty airplanes halfway across the world, burning tens of thousands of dollars in jet fuel and crew time just to find an open hangar in another continent that has the certified staff to perform a mandatory check.
And who ultimately pays for that staggering level of inefficiency?
The passenger.
The passenger does. The era of logging online and booking a $30 budget flight across Southeast Asia for a weekend getaway is coming to a violent end.
It really is.
The compounding cost of simply maintaining the aircraft is going to force ticket prices up across the board. The talent gap is the pin that is going to pop the bubble of infinite aviation growth in Asia.
It creates an economic stall. You have this massive, vibrant region that is a primary driver of the global economy, and it is entirely reliant on seamless air connectivity. Yet that entire system is being choked by a fundamental lack of people willing or trained to hold a wrench.
That is a phenomenal place to wrap up this season finale investigation. So what does this all mean for you, our listener? The next time you book a flight in the Asia-Pacific region, or anywhere in the world really, I want you to remember that invisible ceiling.
It's always there.
We built the world's most impressive, massive MRO hangars. We spent trillions of dollars buying the most advanced, beautiful airplanes ever engineered by human hands. But the industry completely, systematically forgot to value, respect, and train the people tasked with holding the wrenches. We bought the machines, but we devalued the craft.
We did.
Yeah.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as we close out the season. As the liability of these unmaintained aircraft grows, and the supply of fully certified mechanics continues to shrink, the balance of power is going to shift dramatically.
Right.
Could we see a total inversion of the traditional airline hierarchy?
What would that inversion look like?
Think about the immense leverage being created right now. What happens when these blue-collar mechanics look around the hangar and realize that they, not the C-suite executives, not the software engineers, hold the ultimate choke point of global commerce?
Wow.
What happens if they begin to unionize across international borders? What if they realize they have the power to demand equity stakes in the airlines just to keep the planes legally allowed in the sky? We've always put the pilot on a pedestal.
Always.
But with planes becoming increasingly automated to fly, yet infinitely more complex to repair. Will the grease-stained mechanic in the sweltering hangar soon out-earn the pilot in the air-conditioned cockpit?
The people holding the wrenches, holding the keys to the global economy. What a concept to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive and for taking this journey with us all season long. We'll be back, but until then, keep asking the hard questions and remember to look a little closer at the unseen systems keeping your world moving. Take care.